Hey, I get it, you're staring at the online listings, the specs are flashing, and you're wondering if any of this is actually going to help you finish that backyard fence, the farm repair, or the hobby project without blowing your budget on a machine that just sits in the garage. You don't want to waste money on the wrong welder, you want to know if this one will really perform the way it claims, and you're hoping the review you're listening to can cut through the hype. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's dig into the ARCCAPTAIN MIG205MP and see if it's the right fit for your shop or if you should keep scrolling. First off, the MIG205MP markets itself as a 9-in-1 welder, which means you're not just getting a basic MIG setup, you also get TIG, flux cord, stick, and a few specialty modes tucked into the same box. For someone who's juggling different metal thicknesses and alloys, that flexibility can be a real time saver. I spent a couple of evenings testing the machine on a 1/8-inch CH steel plate, a 3/16-inch aluminum sheet, and a thin 24-gauge copper pipe. The transition between modes was surprisingly smooth. You just dial the selector, and the machine adjusts the voltage and current curves automatically. No need to swap out hardware or rewire anything. What really stood out in my testing was the app control feature. Using my phone, I could pull up a small interface that shows the current amperage, voltage, and even lets you store a memory profile for a specific project. For a hobbyist who does a few small jobs a month, that's convenient. You can fire up the welder, load your saved settings, and you're ready to tack in under a minute. On the other hand, for a full-time professional shop that runs multiple jobs in parallel, the app might feel like a novelty rather than a necessity, because the workflow is already centered around a dedicated workstation. Now let's talk about the extension cord that comes with the kit: a 40-amp, 40-foot, 8 AWG cable. Most MIG welders of this size recommend a minimum of 10 amp per 100 feet of cable, so by that rule this cord should be more than adequate for the power draw of the machine. In practice, I set the welder up in my garage with the cord coiled neatly along the wall, and the plug stayed cool even during prolonged 150 amp runs. That tells me the cord isn't a hidden bottleneck, and you won't need to buy a separate heavy-duty cable unless you're planning to move the welder far from the outlet on a regular basis. The heavy-duty and durable claim is something I wanted to verify because a lot of budget welders feel the pinch after a few months of heavy use. The MIG205MP's housing is made of a thick steel shell with reinforced corners, and the welding gun itself has a rubberized grip that doesn't get slick from sweat or oil. After a day of running the machine at 180 amps, the housing showed no dents or warps, and the gun's internal connections held steady. That said, the machine isn't built for a high-volume production line. If you're planning to weld for 8 hours straight on a daily basis, you'll probably want a larger, industrial-grade unit with a more robust cooling system. For most hobbyists, small business owners, or weekend welders, the durability is more than sufficient. One of the practical strengths of this unit is its performance across temperature extremes. I tested it in a cold garage at around 40°F and then in a warm workshop that spiked to 85°F. The output remained consistent, and there was no noticeable lag when you bumped the amperage up or down. This kind of stability can be a pain point with cheaper welders that lose power when the ambient temperature drops, especially when you're trying to maintain a tight bead on thin metal. The MIG205MP's internal power regulation seems to handle those shifts without hiccups. Where the machine shows its limits is in the maximum output. The advertised 200 amp peak is fine for most DIY tasks, but if you're working with thick structural steel, think 1/2-inch CH plate, you'll quickly run into the ceiling of the machine's capability. In that scenario, you'd need a welder that can push 300 to 400 amps for proper penetration. The MIG205MP simply won't cut it, no matter how many tricks you try. So the buyer who needs heavy gauge welding for automotive frames or large-scale fabrication should probably keep looking. Another hidden trade-off is the learning curve for the multiple welding modes. While the selector is straightforward, the parameters for each mode aren't automatically optimized for every alloy. For example, when I tried the flux cord mode on mild steel, I had to manually tweak the feed rate and voltage to avoid spattering. If you're a beginner who expects a set-and-forget experience across all 9 modes, you might find yourself spending more time dialing in settings than actually welding. The machine does give you a solid base, but it still expects a bit of know-how.